Okay, that's better. Thank you. All right, everyone, welcome. Thank you for coming. We are doing lesson number 4. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Kabbalah Lesson number 4. You made it through the first 3, so congratulations. The one that did not make it through was our projector, and I still did not get another one, so we'll have to suffer with what we have. But hopefully by next week we'll have a new one. So doing this on and off thing. Anyway, today's lesson is the world of chaos. The world of chaos. So we've been talking about the faculties, the attributes of the soul, explaining how they are parallel to Seder Hishtalshalut, as you saw from your little map that you have here. The sophisticated network of devolving links between God's desire to create our world and the actual creation. Today we're going to introduce a new understanding of the human soul, as well as an entire new level of the godly devolving network or link in the creation of the world. Let's begin with an exercise, page 111. We'll go through a bunch of questions. There isn't necessarily a right or wrong answer, but let's just go through this quickly. I'm a selfish person. Yes or no? You say no. No? You say yes. Okay. I am not a selfish person. Yes or no? Yes. At times I really only care about myself and well-being. Yes or no? Yes. Sometimes are more significant than my existence. Yes or no? Yes. I would never knowingly do something to hurt another person. Yes. I know that I've hurt others in pursuit of my goals. Yes. I sometimes feel glad when someone else fails. Yes. I do not want to rejoice over someone else's troubles. Yes. I want to do something I find it very difficult to resist it, even when I recognize that it's harmful to my moral and spiritual well-being. Yes. I weigh short-term, whoever said no has not had a bagel this morning. I weigh short-term gains against the long-term harm they may invite. Yes. Now, what we see from this little exercise is that we are, in essence, very contradictory people. And we have things that seem to always contradict each other. Because basically, most people are going to answer yes to all these questions. And at the same time, all these are contradicting one another. So how could they both be right? So the question is, what's going on under the human psyche? What's going on in the human engine and the human hood? So those of you who had studied the Tanya with me say it's easy. I know the answer. We have 2 souls. And that's why we have 2 identities. We actually are schizophrenic. We have 2 identities. Text number 1, page 112. The first of our souls originates in non-holiness. This soul resides in our bloodstream to vitalize our body. It is the source of all our negative character traits, as well as those positive traits that come naturally to us, such as passion and kindness. The Jew's second soul is the actual part of the transcendent God. So I want to point out something here. that we say that the first soul is the soul that resides in our bloodstream, and it's a source of all negative character traits as well as the positive traits, such as compassion and kindness. The second soul is one that is part of the transcendent God. So these, what are we saying? To be clear, these two souls, first one is very human, as far as sophisticated, it possesses qualities greater than intelligence, free choice. It's called the animal soul. And it's being called the animal soul is not necessarily a bad thing. It's called the animal soul in the sense that it's simply focused on its own self-achievements and success. Now, we live across the street from animals. We see them all the time. You see cows, you see horses. These are all wonderful creatures. They're just focused on eating and living their life. And this could also be a source of positive traits. It could be consistent with the underlying drive for self-enhancement. And you could have acts of goodness and kindness, but we're doing it for not for only altruism, but we're doing it because we feel good about it. I feel good that I'm helping someone today. It feels nice to do things that are kind. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with that. It's great, but it's still self-oriented. So when the animal soul acts upon these qualities, it's still doing what it wants. You know, the word for charity in English that's used is philanthropy. Philanthropy means doing something that makes me feel good. In Hebrew, the word tzedakah comes from the word tzedek, which means righteousness, which means you're doing something because it's the right thing, not because it feels good. But anyway, it doesn't necessarily mean that's a bad thing. It's good to do things that are good, even if it makes you feel good. On the contrary. But we have to understand that these are qualities that come from our nefesh habahamis, from our animal soul. I'll turn this off for now till the video, so you won't get a headache from it. So, I think everyone here has a book, right? Okay. So we'll just try and play the video with it. So this is in term 4.1. You see, nefesh habahamis. This is our next term that we're learning today. In your book, lesson number, the red. Yes?
I'm just wondering, is it more of a mitzvah to do a good thing for someone or a bunch of people, whatever, anonymously?
Yes, there definitely is something to that. There are many different levels of charity, and there's definitely something to a higher level of charity when it's done anonymously. That's true.
Because then you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it strictly.
100%. Yes.
Some people do charity for the wrong reasons.
100%. You know, that's the point here is not how exactly you should do it, but we just want to point out. We're just trying to point out that there could be good character traits, and those character traits are associated with the animal soul because they're being done for my own self-gratification. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means that it is more self-oriented. And then we have the second soul, known as the godly soul. This is a divine entity. It yearns for a closer relationship with God and with our other souls, and to fulfill the mission that God has given it. And this comprehends and desires what true goodness is and expects nothing in return. You're doing it only because this is the right thing to do, and no other reason. This is called the nefesh elikis. This is called the godly soul. If we do sometimes things that we know we really don't want to, we're not really interested in it, but I know it's the right thing to do, so I'm going to do it. Like sometimes listening to the rabbi's sermon, you just have to do it. With the famous JFK, what did he say? Ask not. Exactly. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. This has changed probably a lot since JFK's been around. I think today the youth think that the saying is supposed to be the opposite. But anyway, so let's take a look at text number 2. On the other hand, let's take a moment. On the other hand, so which of the two souls is stronger? Which of the two souls is greater? What would you say? Balanced, equal? Okay. Really? You think the godly soul is stronger?
I think the animal soul is stronger because of the able to survive in this world.
Okay. Let me ask you a question. How come you can see 70,000 people sitting in the freezing, frigid cold to go and watch a football game, but you can't see those same people showing up to synagogue because it's too cold? Huh? How come we tend to enjoy a good meal, a good dinner, sometimes more than a prayer that may be very inspiring? Okay, maybe you don't, but most people do. I think that for most people, maybe some not, but for most people, it's very clear that the animal soul is the driving force. Not only that, but also the animal soul is much more natural to us. A child is going to start crying when they're hungry, when they want a bottle or whatever it is from very birth. They're not going to start crying, I want to do a mitzvah, unless they're actually educated that way. That's one of the reasons the concept of a bar and bat mitzvah, the age of 12 and 13, is the age when the godly soul fully is incorporated with the individual. And that's what we call when you become a man or you become a woman, because that's when your godly soul is incorporated with you. And so, let's take a look at text number 2. The ox's strength produces abundant crops. That is to say, the animal soul's drive is more potent than the godly soul's drive. So, the fact of the matter is, we are physical beings, and just like the animal is very strong and is able to carry so much more, they say even a chimpanzee can carry 4 times more than humans. So, the human beings, the animals are very strong. They're able to hold a lot. And this is the strength of the ox. And so this is why you'll find that some people will tend to prefer going to the golf or the mahjong game on a Saturday than coming to synagogue. I mean, yes, there's many who prefer coming to synagogue, but compared to how many people are on the golf course, the ratio is not really there. So, these two souls are always in competition for the hearts and minds of us as individuals. And this is why in the exercise we had this contradictory statements. On one hand, we know what we want to do is the right thing. We always have the right intention. We always have the right ideas. But then the other side comes to us and says, well, you got to think about yourself. And so when you're conflicting between watching football on Sunday or coming to the Torah class on Sunday, so I'm very happy that everyone comes to the Torah class, but we make sure to finish on time if you want to go to football at 1 o'clock. So you could do both. But the point over here is again that the human soul, and what's being called the animal soul, has a strength and is in constant conflict, if you will, with the godly soul. They tell a story of a chassid. His name was Reb Shmuel Munkis. There was a gathering. He was one of the disciples of the first Chabad Rebbe, and he was. They were gathering together. They were having what they call a farbrengen. They were spending some time together with the Hasidim, and someone came in, and I guess one of the wives came in and brought them in a good pot of stew, something really, really good. It must have been a good brisket or something. And Reb Shmuel, he takes a look at it, he takes a sniff at it, and he picks it up and he starts dancing with it. He's dancing and dancing, and all the Hasidim, they say, "Come on, what are you doing here? We're all hungry. We want to eat something." And he says, no. He takes the whole thing and he dumps it in the trash. And everyone's upset. What's going on? And shortly after, the butcher comes in and says, Don't eat that meat. It's not kosher. We just found out. We sent you the wrong meat. That's not a kosher meat." And everyone looks at Reb Shmuel and says, "How did you know? How did you know to throw this meat out in the trash? You knew there's something wrong with it." And he said that when he first met with the Rebbe, when he first had a private audience with the Rebbe, he was determined to never have himself be overcome by his desire for physical things. And he said that there was something about this that he really, really, really wanted it. And he said, and I was almost not able to control myself with eating this thing. And so I knew there had to be something wrong with it. And so he said, therefore I threw it out. Now, okay, maybe we all don't have this level of sensitivity. But the fact is that we do have desires for things, for all kinds of things. And this is because this is not a bad thing. This is our natural tendencies that we have. Now, in Lesson 1, we talked about the 3 garments of the soul, and each of these souls have both of these. Then we talked about the 10 attributes, the 10 sefirot, and then Lesson 3, we explained how this applies to us in the level of keter, the desire, the pleasure, and now we know that this applies to us not once, but twice. Because each of these souls that we talked about, each has its own makeup. So when we talk about, for example, the garments, it says thought, speech, and action. So you have the godly thought, speech, and action, and you have the animal thought, speech, and action. Each one is made up of these garments, and the same thing with the 10 sefirot. Each one is made up of the 10 sefirot. So when you have chesed, kindness, or gevura, discipline, you have the kindness and the discipline of the godly soul, and you have the kindness and the discipline of the animal soul. Now comes the question. If we're talking about the Seder Hishtalshalut, that God is giving this transition of the worlds from level to level, and this is how God is creating the world. So now you're saying that God is creating this being called the animal soul. Why then is one incompatible seemingly with the sanctity and godliness? Where does the animal soul come from?
The reptilian brain.
Okay. The pre-human, what's it called? So, we're exactly, in other words, if God is creating a world that He intends to create for His purpose in the world, for bringing His desire, His creation in the world, then how is it that he's creating something that doesn't seem to be in line with what he wants? And this is where we're going to introduce a concept that is extremely radical, perhaps, but taken from the Kabbalah and the deepest and most complex, but also most fundamental areas of Kabbalah and the Hasidic teachings. I was looking this morning for a book. I couldn't find it. It's a book about this thick that goes through just this one subject that we study in yeshiva. And we're going to introduce now the concept called Or and Keli. But let's first see, we're going to go back to the Atzilut. Remember the term Atzilut?
Yes.
Yes, Atzilut. Atzilut means close to God. Right? We had that on your map. Atzilut. Atzilut, that we said, is the 10 Sefirot, right? So alongside the green. Let's take a look and read text number 3. The king is present within the 10 attributes of Atzilut. He and his vessels are one in that world, and he and his lights are one in that world. So what is this? He and his vessels are one in the world, and he and his lights are one in the world. So what we're saying is that the Biyah, which we said, Bria, Yitzira, Asiya, which is the lower realms, they are bearing their own identity separate from God. And Atzilut means that quantitatively it's different because it's entirely godly. However, there are two aspects that we find here. One is called Or, light, and the other is called Keli, vessel. What is the structure behind this? Another word that we could use for light, we could use the word energy. Or another word for vessel, we could use the word container. So here you have a few examples. When we talk about light, so we think about light as just a light coming, a light shining. But a light means an energy that's being given off. And the problem with that is that you have to have somehow to contain that energy. Otherwise, it becomes chaotic. So here's a few examples. In a book, page 115, you have the light is the ideas, and the vessel is the words to incorporate the ideas. If you're not able to bring the ideas into words, then it's a light without a vessel, and it becomes useless. You have an example of a melody. You have the emotions that you want to bring out, and then you have the musical notes or the lyrics that are going along with that song to try and express what you're feeling or what the composer is feeling at the time. So you have the emotions, which are very raw, but you have to contain that emotion into the tune and the lyrics that it's bringing about. You have the same thing in business and in every aspect of life. In business, you have the vision, and then you have the strategy, how you're actually going to impart that. In relationships, you have love, but if you just have love, that's not going to help. You have to have some sort of action that is able to express that love. And then you have that in religion as well. You have the beliefs and you have the rituals. So, some people say, I only believe. Some people say, I only do the rituals. Well, no, you need both. You need the beliefs of it, and you also need the rituals. And so, this is where everything has to have the light and the vessels. If you only have a book with ideas, it's just a fantasy. Or if you only have love, it's just a fantasy. It's not a relationship. Where the couple comes to the therapist. They've been having a lot trouble. And the wife says, he never says that he loves me. And he says, well, I told you on the first date that I love you, and if anything changes, I'll let you know. So obviously it doesn't work. You have to have ways of expressing the love. You have to have ways of bringing it out. So that's the light and the vessels. So these examples are basically showing of how things interact with each other. That it could differ from thing to thing, but the concept is that everything has to have the light, has to have the energy, then you have to have the vessel, the container that is controlling that. And now, in a Kabbalistic way, the same thing is with God creating the world. When God chose to emanate from the infinite ability, what we call the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light, the Sephirot, so he projected 10 energies. And each of these divine energies has to produce a single Sephirah. But they are just powers. They're just energies. They're lights. They're Or, which means light. And if each one is just an infinite light, then it would not actually contain anything. It has to actually be finite in order to be controlled in a certain way, in a certain manner. And this is what we call the 10 Sephirot. The 10 Sephirot are lights, are energies which are tasked with producing something specific in a specific way. For example, if you only have a certain thing, something horrible happens. I'm going to take a simple example that's been constantly on the news. We saw this horrible tragedy that happened on October 7th. And then you wake up the next morning and you assume that everyone is going to see and have the reaction that we're feeling. You know, feel sadness, feel anxious, whatever it is that comes out. But then you wake up the next morning and you see a completely different response. They're gleeful and they're cheerful and they're happy and they're parading. And what's going on here? Did we just look at the same picture? Do we just see the exact same thing? And the answer is that different people could look at the same thing and have different responses. Of course, I'm not at all condoning their response, but just to bring out the idea that you could have a completely different response to seeing the exact same thing. Why is this? Because everything is raw. And depending on how we choose to look at it, it could bring about anger. It could bring about compassion. It could bring about sadness. There's many different feelings that could come about from it, and many people may see it in different ways. For some people, they may say, this is a moment I got to get up and I got to go do something. I'm ready to go to Israel and fight. For some people, they may be very sad. They may be lying in bed and just crying. And there's very different responses to the same exact thing. So, what God is doing with these 10 Sephirot is basically He's saying we have to channel this in a specific way. So we have Chesed, we have the energy, the light of Chesed. It has to be contained in a container of Chesed, of kindness, the way it needs to be channeled out. Now, sometimes that means that people that are very deserving will get the Chesed. That means that could be more associated with Gevura. Or it could be that God is giving an abundant Chesed, way beyond what a person is deserving. If it's what a person is deserving, then it's within Gevura. If it's way beyond what a person is deserving, then that's within the level of Chesed. So there's many different ways of how that could be channeled. So, in other words, we have the energy, the light, and it needs to be quantified with what we call a keli, a vessel. Take a look at text 4a. This is from Rabbi Shalom Dober, B'shah Sheiktimu. You see those words? That is the book that he wrote. It starts with B'shah Sheiktimu, which is a discourse that starts with those words. And took over 3 years of writing every single week another discourse just to talk about this subject. The light itself, and so you should be very thankful to the JLI for breaking this down in a very simple way. The light itself is in a state of simple abstractness. The level imposes definition in the light in the form of particular attributes of wisdom, kindness, and so forth. So you have the divine lights that are generic rays of godliness, and then you have the kalim, and then you have the container. And so everything has to be defined, everything has to be quantified. So if someone says, I stand with Israel, okay, so what does that mean exactly? You're going to stand on your feet? Or you're going to do what? How is that going to play out in your life? Otherwise, it's just a sentence. It doesn't mean anything. I mean, it's a good sentence, but what exactly is that going to mean in your life? So, does it mean we have the ability to be loving, to be compassionate, or for some it may come out being angry, sad. There's all different ways that it could play out. And we'll see if we'll be angry about this, about the video. Any questions? Yeah.
We talked about the fact that people look at certain things and react differently to those things, like the example you gave. But does it also have to do with their knowledge and their ability to understand history, or what that really means, or what's going on in a deeper sense? Because I mean, there are
100%. I'm not getting into why people think the way they are. This is just to explain the concept of what these two aspects are and keli. That the point of R is that it's a raw energy, and the point of keli is that needs to be defined. It needs to be quantified. My point is not to discuss the particular situation. I just wanted to bring that to explain this idea of how you could have many different things. So here's the channels of raw infinite energy coming out in each of these 10 sephirot.
Welcome to our fourth video on the world of Kabbalah, our journey through the mystical layers of the Kabbalistic system. Today, we'll analyze the sephirot, which are actually a combination to take a specific function. Okay, that's a bit heavy, so let's use Benny as an example. Benny got beaten up at school, and Benny's dad is really disturbed, which, by the way, is a powerful but undefined energy. It is the light or force without any particular vessel or outlet. But Dad has several options. He could release it as frustration at the school, anger at the attacker, empathy, love and guidance for Benny, compassion for a bully who needs emotional redirection, and so on. Those are all potential vessels for the same basic light. So the vessels of the sephirot are 10 unique outlets for the same basic energy. They apply structure and definition that turn divine energy to chesed, love, gevura, discipline, tiferet, harmony, and so on. What if we kept the divine light, but deleted its vessels? It would be like Dad feeling deeply disturbed at Benny's experience, but having no ability to express or do anything about it. And what if we kept the vessels, but deleted the light? It would be like Dad having the ability to react, but lacking any motivation. In either case, there would be no reaction, no result. So this example helped us understand why the Sefirot are equipped with lights and vessels. But
We'll be back on in a second.
with its source, God himself, just as some
This is the light and the vessel not working well.
God gives it a powerful appreciation for God. It longs to melt into God's infinite self and is utterly averse to being channeled into a limited structure. As for the vessels, they pull the other way. They're so addicted to structure that they have no patience for the abstractness of life. Talk about a personality clash. How could they ever fuse together? Simple. We're discussing the world of Atzilut, which is in tune with God's desire. It knows that the purpose of its existence is to create the finite worlds of Beriah, Yetzirah, and Asiya. So out of loyalty for God, the conflicting components of the Sefirot set aside their dispositions and work harmoniously to achieve the greater good of God's goals. That's good news for us for two reasons. One, it allows us to exist. Two, souls are the great-grandchildren of the Sefirot of Atzilut. The ability to set aside our personal dispositions to achieve the greatest good, whether it is to care for another, pursue a mitzvah act, or embrace our ethical responsibility.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Yeah. So this is the first aspect of the kalim, is in order to allow that the vessel, that the light, that the energy should be contained in a vessel. Now there's another aspect of that, and this was alluded to in the video, and I want to remind you that you can watch the video again online if you go to myjli.com/Kabbalah. All these videos that we show, as well as the PowerPoints, you could see everything, as well as some other videos and articles and all kind of stuff. If you're not sure what that is, just look at the back of your book. It's right there, myjli.com/Kabbalah, and you have all these videos and stuff. So, where are we up to? Yeah, so the other thing that the Kali does is that it allows for God to have an interaction with the worlds. Because there has to be some relationship between a concealed world and a revealed world. How do you reveal something that is completely concealed? And so, God is using the attribute of chesed, for example, but there are some times that the response may come about in ways of gevura, or in different ways. So how is God relating to this world? It's through these different attributes, and that allows God to relate to the world. And so, this is the aspect of Kali. In other words, it's more world associated. But then when you talk about the or, the light, they aren't capable on their own to associate with a physical world. And so the Ein Sof, which means the infinite light, has to manifest this light in order to intimately connect it with its place. But the problem is that, as we said earlier, that light is always going to be connected to its source. Remember we said that? Light is always connected to its source. So this is like a dichotomy that the light and the vessels have. Because the light always wants to connect to its source, always wants to be part of its source, and then at the same time, the vessel is always separated from its source. It's always different. Take, for example, the book, right? So, in the author's mind, those concepts are always going to be flowing in his mind. And it's always going to be going. It's always going to be, it's always going to be working. And it could be a constantly changing, but in the author's mind, it's always chaotic, these ideas. But then eventually he's writing it down in a book, and that sort of is like separate. That's like a different identity than who I really am. But the light is always going to be connected to me. Or the example of the composer. The emotions that singer is always feeling, or the composer is always feeling, he can't really convey what he has, but the way it's put down in the tune and lyrics is now sort of a separate identity than who I really am. And so it's this dichotomy that's bringing together something that wants to be away from me and that wants to be connected to me at the same time. You follow? You understand?
But what is the motivator of all of these actions and tying up and?
What do you mean, who's the motivator? Well, God is the motivator.
Okay, well, I was waiting to hear that.
Okay, yeah. Well, if it's within the human being, then it's the human. Well, we're as we said, we're a reflection of God. Our soul is a reflection of God. Let's go to text 4b. The lights of Atzilut, by their very nature, are abstract. They also aspire to return to their source and to become wholly submitted within their sublime origin. Accordingly, they are far removed from the creating the world's Bria Yitzir and Asiya. Rather, the lights must first install themselves into the vessels of Atzilut in order to energize the creation of the world. So let's take a look at these new terms that we learned. Term 4.3 is Orot, abstract divine energies that are closely tied to their source but are primed to produce divine attributes. And then we have Kelim, vessels, divine entities of definition and structure that define the lights and channel their energies to the lower worlds. Okay? Those are the terms that we learn now. We still didn't even get to the point here. This is all a build-up to where we're getting to. So now we have this combination of the Or and the Keli. So the Or, number one, is intimately connected to its source, which is why, number one, they are abstract rather than defined, and B, they desire to be subsumed within their source rather to be channeled elsewhere. Those are the two aspects of light. Number one, again, they're abstract, and they're abstract and not defined. Hello. And number two, they are subsumed within their source rather than channeled elsewhere. Yeah, help them with the chair. On the other hand, Kelim is the opposite. Their source is abstract and infinite. And, but they themselves, Kelim, are, what do we call Kelim? Kelim are limited, and they have to come in a configuration. So the Or and the Keli are opposites, and yet they are somehow coming together. This understood? Okay, let's say that again. The Or, the lights, are number one, they are abstract, they're not defined. And number two, their desire to be subsumed within their source rather to be channeled elsewhere. The Keli is just the opposite. The Keli is limited and has to be configured and wants to be separated from the source. It has to be outside of its source. Clear? Let's see, text 4c. Maybe it will explain it better in the text. Lights and vessels are inherently opposites. The lights, by their very nature, are abstract. They also aspire to return to their source and become wholly subsumed within their sublime origin. By contrast, vessels have a defined nature. They desire to retain their configuration and are naturally inclined to descend to lower realms. 4d, they are entirely submitted to God, to God's intent for creation, namely that the universe should become an orderly habitat and not be left in chaos. And this is why they are able to transcend their natures, because they ultimately realize that this is the world that God needs, and so therefore we're willing to come together.
Question,
Yes.
what does it mean when it says they're inclined to descend to lower realms?
Because vessels want to be separated from its source. That's the nature of vessels. As we gave the example of the words in the book, or the words of the song, the lyrics of the song, they are inclined to be separated from their source. That's what it means, that they're inclined to descend to lower. We're the lower realms, yes. So let's see if we can get this up here. Aurot, lights, abstract divine energies that are closely tied to their source but are primed to produce divine attributes. And a kalim are divine entities of definition and structure that define the lights and channel their energy into lower worlds. So we have Orot and Kalim. Let's look at this again. Orot, abstract rather than define, and desire to be with their source and not channeled elsewhere. The Kalim don't sense their source or desire to be connected, interested in what's happening below. So this is why the Or and the Kali, now you understand, these are opposites, but what do? They say God needs to create a world. God needs to bring about his desire in this realms below. So therefore, we are going to we are going to come together and make that happen. And the same is true with everything in life, right? A business. We gave the example of business. You want to you want to build a business, right? You teach people how to build businesses. So what do? So you have the ideas. But simply having the ideas is not going to get you rich. If you want to get rich, you have to follow the right procedures in order to make that happen. You have to hire the right people, and you have to put the right procedures in place. Now, what you're actually doing is you're actually separating from yourself, from your own ideas, from your own aspirations, from your own dreams. And you're sort of separating that, and you're saying you have to now bring other people to get other people involved. You have to incorporate that into specific ideas, into specific measures. So you're actually separating from yourself in order to bring about your mission that you're looking to accomplish. You understand? So this is true about everything in life. You have the Or, which is the energy, and you have the Kele, which is the contracted vessel to bring that about, and the only way you could accomplish anything is if you bring the two together.
So it's like the soul and the physical body.
100%. There's going to be a twist to that. We're going to get to that soon. We're going to make it more exciting. Don't worry.
Kabbalah comes into the three aspects of the mind. The Chachma is the idea. The Binah is the planning together, and the Da'at is the emotions.
Right? 100%. 100%. They say that a couple was going on a honeymoon. They were enjoying themselves out in the Caribbean, and they're sitting on the beach. And the husband said, "If it weren't for my money, we wouldn't be here at all." And the wife retorts back and says, "My dear, if it weren't for your money, there wouldn't be we in the first place." Okay, so now let's go. Oh wow, we're late in time. Okay. Now, before I get to the next part, I want to give a little bit of an introduction. No, it's not an introduction. It's just a side note that I think is important to understand. When we talk about Kabbalah, okay. When we talk about Kabbalah, we need a context. The context is that you have to understand that Kabbalah comes from the biblical Torah, the biblical text. You know, a friend of mine once asked me to learn with him a certain book in Kabbalah. It's a difficult book. If this is acting up again, we'll shut it back off. A very difficult book in Kabbalah. And I said, okay, and I sat down and I started studying it with him. And we started quoting verses in the Torah, and I started realizing that there was a disconnect between these Torah verses and the Kabbalah that's being studied. In other words, the Kabbalah was referencing biblical verses, but he didn't seem to understand that there's a connection, that the Kabbalah is explaining that. He only saw the Kabbalah aspect. So it's important to understand that Kabbalah is explanation on the Torah. And when you lose that connection, that is when you end up with a what we'll call a Madonna Kabbalah. Okay? That really doesn't have a source in the Jewish teachings. So you have to understand that the Kabbalah that we're teaching is connected to the original source, which is the Torah, the Bible. And so now we're going to explain what we call the world of chaos. And we're going to look at the verse, the very beginning of the Torah. Text number 5. In the beginning of God's creation of the heavens and the earth was chaotic and desolate. Darkness was on the surface of the deep, and God's Spirit hovered over water. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. You ever wonder what this means? And the earth was chaotic and desolate. You remember? Well, you study. Most people study this verse, right? Tohu vavohu. Chaotic and desolate. What exactly does that mean? So, in Kabbalah, so there's different explanations, a more simple and a more basic level. But the Kabbalists explain that before God created the world, there was actually what we call a world of chaos. A chaotic world. A world what's called Tohu. Tohu. Text number 6, Reb Chaim Vital, who was one of the students of what's known as the Arizal Reb Yitzchak Luria. The earth was chaotic and desolate. This refers to the breaking of the vessels. God's Spirit hovered over the water. This refers to the lights that the vessels failed to absorb. What is he saying? He's saying that in the Seder Hishtalshalut, in the chain of the worlds, there was first a world of Tohu. Chaotic desolation. Now, this may be referred to as a cosmic error or something undesirable, but it's really not that. It's another realm that is beyond what we know as the fixed world. Tikkun means the fixed world. Text 7a, the lights of Tohu were intense and powerful. They intensely desired to be fulfilled and subsumed within their emanating source. They had no sense of what their source wanted of them. As a result, they failed to deviate from their default nature for the sake of submitting to their greater purpose. So in the beginning, before God created the world that we know, is a world what's called a Tohu. And a Tohu means that there is no sync, there is no connection between the Or and the Keli. They didn't find that connection with each other. They weren't able to come together. You had these divine powers, these divine, incredible, infinite powers, and they said, we don't want to separate from our source. We want to stay connected to our source. And
So would you say there was no vessel?
they did not connect to the vessel. And there was what's called the shattering of the vessel, Shavirat HaKelim. The shattering of the vessels, meaning the vessels were unable to have that deep connection there. You know, in the human, sometimes you find that people that what's referred to as special needs, that they sometimes have incredible talents, right? And the reason for that is because they have an incredible energy without the proper vessel to be able to contain that energy that they have. Where, you know, the average person has a balance. Some people don't have that balance. They're born with that incredible aura. But so as a result, you have that the or was too strong. And what does it mean? That the light is intimately connected with its source and did not want to separate and connect with the vessel that it's supposed to connect to. Text 7b, the vessels cannot contain the light because they were not sufficiently submissive to pair with the light's intense abstractiveness. They acted like a wick resistant to the flame, resulting in the flame slipping away. So the example he's giving over here is that you have a flame and a wick. In order for the flame to be a flame, it has to hold on to the wick. The second the flame disconnects to the wick, the flame disappears. So the wick is the keli holding on to it. The wick is and the light is the or. And what is the result? The result is a unhappy marriage between the two, right? Another example of this, let's say you have someone that wants to build a building, and they have everything brought. The building is ready to be built. You have a truck drops off the cement and the bricks and the furniture and the masonry, and everything is dropped off right there at the construction site. But the contractor says, I refuse to look at the blueprints. Right? So you're not going to get a building because you have to put it together in a proper way. So you had these lights, you had these energies, but did not want to be put in its proper place. And this is called the world of Tohu. Let's take a look at your term sheet. Term 4.5, Tohu chaos. A system in which divine root lights and kingdom vessels fail to sense God's ultimate purpose for which they had been emanated, resulting in the lights returning to their source and the vessels remaining without the light. Right? Then you have Shavirat HaKelim, breaking of the vessels, when the vessels no longer lend definition to the lights but become standalone entities. So if you just have a bunch of words, but you don't have an author that's putting those words together to make meaning out of it, then those are broken vessels. You have to have an author that's going to put the words in place. And then on the other hand, if you just have a author who could be brilliant but doesn't know how to divine their ideas into words, then that's the light without the vessels. Or if you have a bunch of words sitting there without someone putting it together, that's vessels without the lights. So you have to have this marriage between the two to come together. And this is the world of Tohu. So you have this contrast to the world of Tohu, and that is what we call the world of Tikkun. And Tikkun means Tikkun literally means fixed or corrected, meaning everything is put in its place and everything is doing what it's supposed to do. Take a look at term 4.7, Tikkun correction, the second emanation of the Sphira in which light and vessels sense God's purpose, causing them to set aside their default natures and allowing them to remain paired with each other. So when you have the extreme light and extreme vessels not being able or willing to connect to each other, then that is called a world of Tohu, a world of chaos, where the kalim break. You have Shavirat HaKelim, the vessels break. But then, when you're able to bring the two together and they are able to connect and bring about something that is useful, that is what we call a world of Tikkun, a world that is corrected, a world that is that's in the right place. Any questions so far? No? Understood? Yes? Okay, good. Now with everything said, we're going to get back to the souls, to the two souls. What does it have to do with the discussion of the two souls? So in studying the topic of Tohu, it's natural to ask, why did God emanate this idea of Tohu if ultimately the purpose is to have Tikkun? Ultimately, we want to have God's world, the world that in the right place, everything in place, So what is the idea of having this world of Tohu? Why didn't you launch directly into the world of Tikkun? It wasn't that it was a mistake, and we messed up. Okay, now let's try and do it again. That's the way some people with a very shallow understanding look at it, but that's not the case. It wasn't a mistake. It was meant to be that you first have the world of Tohu, and then it's re-energized in a new way of Tikkun. And the answer is that we still want to have the R in its full strength, and you want to have the vessel in its full strength. But when they're exposed to too much, then that is when they don't come together. So God created these four worlds: Atzilut, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. And they are the world which we're able to contain in a specific way. Take, for example, a person that may have had some sort of tragedy or trauma in their life, and regardless of, even when they go to therapy and are able to rebuild their life, there's always going to be some sort of trauma within the life that you live. So the past is always going to affect even the present, even when things come together in a certain way. So in Tohu, their being out of sync meant that they desired to be close with God, and now in a world where God is concealed, their being out of sync means that they are losing that direct connection to God. Let's take a look at text number 8. We are comprised of both Tohu and Tikkun. Our godly souls are products of Tikkun and are therefore inherently subservient to God. Our animal souls and bodies are products of the broken vessels of Tohu. All right, now it's starting to come together. Although inanimate objects, plants, and animals are also linked with Tohu, the concept of separation from God is far more pronounced in humans. That's because all other things cannot sin and therefore do not become completely separated from God. Humans, by contrast, on account of our bodies and animal souls, are capable of sin and consequently of becoming far more separated from God. So you say, what is the point of that? Why does God want us to be a created being that is able to separate from God, that's able to make bad choices? And we all see what's going on when human beings make bad choices. Why does God want it to be that way?
Freedom of choice.
Right. But the question is why? Why is that important?
So that you can learn from your mistakes and your sins.
Okay. Yeah.
I had thought, maybe incorrectly, that God created and he didn't like what he saw and he started from scratch.
Right. So
And that's when he did light to dark.
So I'm saying I pointed this out, that understanding that in that way is sort of giving a very basic or elementary understanding of what the concept of Tohu is. That God made a mistake, I'm going to try again, right? That doesn't really add up when you're talking about God. So the idea that we're bringing out is that it's actually part of the process. Part of the process is going through that broken spirit in order to bring about the ultimate in the world that we have. We're soon going to explain why it's important. And that's what we're getting to the next part.
Rabbi, can I ask you
Yeah.
Can it be simplified that God is the light and he needed us as the vessel to erect chaos?
Yes, but the question over here that we're discussing is, why do you need that chaos? So we understand that a proper world is the light of vessels. That we understand. That makes sense. Question is, why do you want the broken vessels? Why do you want the chaotic? That's the question here. Why is that part of the journey?
To show that there's an idea of progress that things get better.
Okay, but that's assuming that the beginning was messed up, the beginning was wrong, and now we need to correct it. To say that doesn't really make sense. To say with God that God, so to speak, messed up, and now He needs to fix it up. So in other words, it has to be part of the plan. The chaos has to be part of the plan. Yes.
This reminds me of the philosophical treatises of thesis and antithesis.
Okay.
Philosophers who have for centuries, thesis and antithesis.
Okay. Very good. So to help us understand this, let's understand the differences between the godly soul and the animal soul. And this will also help us understand the difference between tohu and tikkun. So the first thing is the idea that tohu came first before tikkun. And the animal soul as well. The animal soul was the first to be in the body, and the divine soul comes in later, which is why the animal soul is much more effective in the body than the godly soul. That's number one. Number two, the animal soul as well as tohu both have the same theme, that they are self-centered, whereas the tikkun and the godly soul are both mission-oriented. They're both about fulfilling their purpose and their mission in life. Number three, deviation versus loyalty. The animal soul prompts us to deviate from God's will, as is tohu out of sync. On the other hand, the godly soul remains committed to things that God wants. Number four, broken vessels versus complete vessels. Where's everyone turning? I'm going through these. I'm not reading it. I'm telling you. Let me finish these points. So again, I'm going to go through this again. Now, one difference we see is that maybe I can get it up on the board. The first verse second. The animal soul and tohu come first. The godly soul and tikkun come second. That's number one. Number two, the godly soul and the animal soul and tohu are self-centered. The godly soul and tikkun are both mission-oriented. Number three, the animal soul and tohu are both deviation from the purpose, from God's will, and the other ones are focused on being loyal to God's will. Another aspect is broken vessels versus complete vessels. The animal soul as well as tohu have broken vessels. Let's see if I can pull this back up again. And the godly soul are complete vessels as well as tikkun. And finally, and this is where it's going to be the key. The key is that the animal soul and tohu both are much more powerful. They have the strength. And the godly soul and tikkun are, in a certain sense, average strength, if you will, doesn't have that same aggressive energy. So let's see if we can pull this up. Here. Okay, these are the points that we said. Tohu, tikkun, and the souls. First versus second, self-centered versus mission-oriented, deviation versus loyalty, broken vessels versus complete vessels, and powerful versus average strength. And this is where this last one is going to show us why it's important to have the chaos. What was the question again?
We learn from our mistakes and we become better person. And so basically what it's saying to me. You learn from mistakes. You're not as strong as the enemy.
Right. And what we're actually going to do now is to take your point a step further and say it's not only that I'm learning from my mistakes and therefore I'll still be okay, but actually those mistakes help us become a more powerful person, a greater person. And the things that had those aspects in life that were, if you will, trauma or difficult or challenging, actually is what is the most powerful aspect of who we are.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
isn't that implying that we are more leaning towards doing bad things than good things because that bad is so powerful?
Well, I want to reiterate from the beginning of the discussion. We never said the animal soul is bad. We said the animal soul is self-oriented. It's true that bad could come off of. Bad is an offshoot of that. What we would call the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is an offshoot of that. But it's important to recognize the animal soul is not a bad soul. That's what we said. Even good things come from it. Even kindness comes from it. The point of the animal soul is just self-oriented. Let's take a look at text number 9. Very good.
His mother
Jacob and Esau.
above Esau.
Actually, in page 130 in your book, it goes through Jacob and Esau. This is true. So whoever read the portion that we just read, why did Isaac want to bless Esau? Because he saw the tohu aspect within Esau. And the mother said, we need both. But let's first explain text number 9. All the mitzvahs are designed exclusively to purify the animal soul and mortal body. By contrast, the divine soul does not require rectification. It has no intrinsic need to become installed within the animal soul and mortal body. The sole purpose for doing so is for it to illuminate and rectify them. Understand this well. The reason the soul descends to this world is to rectify and purify. So I'm talking about the whole purpose of the godly soul. The godly soul does not need to be in this world. Why does the godly soul come into this world? Because it needs to use the power of the body to accomplish the great things that it could. So when it uses that, when it uses the body in which it encloses itself, it now has the powers, the energy of the animal soul, which comes from Tohu, to accomplish tremendous things. Which is why we see that all the mitzvahs are essentially associated with physical aspects. Because it's the physical that is able to bring about the greatest power and the greatest energy. And so Chassidus explains, so therefore Tohu is not evil. Tohu is something that we have that allows us to be flexible beyond what the simple capacity of the godly soul is. And how is this done? This is done through mitzvahs. God says that I have vessels. It's true, they're vessels. And these vessels are being elevated through the animal soul. And every mitzvah that's done has to be done through the animal soul. So in other words, what we're sort of doing now is we're making this partnership between the godly soul, which is tikkun, and using the influence of the energy of tohu to bring about that powerful aspect that it has. And this is why everything within the Torah is confined in a certain sense to this physical world. And you say, what's the point of doing it in a physical world? I could just feel, I could just have an inspiration. But God says that within this physical world is the sparks, these tohu sparks. And each one has the ability to become great and to become powerful if you use it out in the right way by attaching it together with the godly soul. Let's take a look at text number 10. Rabbi Gershon Ber of Paher deeply understood Hasidic philosophy, was a man of few words. Nevertheless, he had a habit of translating everything into Yiddish. I heard him counting the Omer on the first night, translating each Hebrew word into Yiddish as he did so. He did the same on each subsequent night of the Omer, translated everything to Yiddish. He was once asked by Rabbi Peretz, the rabbi of Nevel and later of Chernigov, whether it's permissible to translate every prayer into Yiddish, including portions of the prayer during which one is forbidden to make an interruption. Rabbi Peretz asked, why do you want to do that? He responded, my animal soul understands Yiddish better. So what was he trying to say? He was trying to say, yeah, okay, my godly soul understands the prayers, that's great. But I need the energy of my animal soul. That's really what I want to make a change with. And so this is why we find that ultimately everything is about infusing the divine energy through the animal soul. Text number 11. Do not assume that the only time we are close to God is while we are engaged in Torah study, prayer, and the performance of a mitzvah, and that we have turned away from God while engaged in earthly endeavors such as eating, drinking, and other needs. This is not the case, for we're instructed to know God in all your ways. We can connect to God through every endeavor. So everything that we do, we work, we eat, we sleep, we have hobbies, we exercise, we play golf, we play mahjong, all kinds of things that we like to do. Each of these is actually, this is not that this is not a godly aspect. Each of these are vessels to be able to infuse it with a godly energy that is far beyond the energy that could come about just by studying and by prayer in a synagogue as well. You know, we gave the example of 70,000 people coming to a frigid stadium to watch a football game. Now imagine, and this is actually something that happens. It comes Hanukkah time, and the Chabad rabbi comes, and during halftime pulls out a menorah and does a menorah lighting for all 70,000 people. Which do you think is more powerful for those people? To see a menorah lit in the synagogue or to see a menorah lit in the football stadium? Right? Exactly, yeah. So, when we direct our activities, and by the way, this is actually being done even here in Orlando, they're going to have one. In Tampa, they're going to have one. In Miami. So yeah, there's actually a Chabad. There's a Chabad at the Miami Dolphins. They actually have a Chabad that's in the stadium. So anyway, so we can direct all activities towards a higher purpose. For example, if you go exercise, instead of just saying, I need it for my body, but you're saying, I need my body to be strong because this is what God gave me in order to use it out to serve God properly. When we engage in certain hobbies, it enables us to foster meaningful connections between each other. When we are able to do certain activities, to be able to connect to people in ways that otherwise would not be possible. And so, when we keep our eyes and ears open, we can always learn lessons from everything in life, and to be able to bring about some divine energy in every aspect of life. The Rebbe, by a Hasidic talk, he once discussed certain where is this? Certain fields of work, of where you can learn to serve Hashem. So you have an attorney. So an attorney, what's his job? His job is to build a defense, no matter what. And so this can teach us how you always have to find the good in a fellow Jew. And always try and find a defense for someone. Maybe that's why there's so many Jewish attorneys. An engineer. What is the job of the engineer? He knows the significance of every screw. And he knows that you can't make any mistakes. Every single thing has to be used for the right reason. And so when we look in every aspect of life, we realize that no, it wasn't just that, well, messed up and let's go and do this again and fix it up. But it was deliberately this way. God infused the energy of Tohu into this world. The energy of Tohu and those broken vessels is infused within this world, so we could now impart that energy in our way of serving God through our, what we'll call tikkun, or godly soul. Text 12. The animal soul is tremendously powerful due to its lofty source. Consequently, although it has fallen far below, it continues to generate far greater passion than the godly soul can produce on its own. You see, getting back to the example of what's going on now in the world with, especially with the Jewish people, you're finding that people are waking up to their Jewish faith in ways that they never have. And people are coming out and saying, now I want to show that I'm going to be a proud Jew. And you say it doesn't make any sense. Now is when you should be hiding. But instead you find that there are people that are coming out and saying, you know what, the way I'm going to respond, I'm going to make sure that my Star of David is seen. Right? I'm going to make sure that I'm going to wear a yarmulke just because you want to try and tell me that this is not who I am. So what they're actually doing is they're taking the animal soul on the journey of the godly soul and saying, I'm going to make this part of who I am. So we're going to just wrap this up with a story. Another chassid of the Alter Rebbe. He was deeply troubled. He said, despite his efforts to educate and inspire his son had lost his way and started, at that time, he started seeking out other religions, etc. So he turned to his Rebbe, to the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, for guidance. He said, can you speak to him, do something? So he said, are you able to get him to come to me? I'll speak to him. So he was able to get him to go speak to him. He came to see the Rebbe, and he came. The Rebbe asked him, how did you get here? He said, I got here by horse and buggy, right? I got here by a horse. That's the way travel was then. He says, if you want to make it more modern, you could say, I got here by Tesla. It would be the same thing. And he says to him, a horse, how does it take you? He says, well, if you have a fast horse, then you get there really fast. If you have a slow horse, it will take you really slow. He says, now what happens if that really, really fast horse is going in the wrong direction? And you start losing that direction very, very quickly. He says, but when I realize I strayed, I can return to the correct path as well very, very quickly. So he looked at him and he says, when you realize you strayed away, And he kept repeating this again and again and again until the boy fainted and recognizing what the message that he was telling him. What was the message? We're all riding our horses, right? We're all putting in our Teslas and saying, go do what you got to do. But we have to make sure that we're harnessing the energy of the physical world around us for the right things. And if you harness that energy, it's incredibly, incredibly powerful. We have a world today that you can do things that you could never have done in history. And with the snap of a finger, you're able to reach the other side of the world. Incredibly, incredibly powerful. But with that also comes a challenge. You could also stray away very, very quickly. Our job is to harness the energies that we have today, to not lose sight of where we have to go, and to use that for the right purposes and for the right things, and then we will ultimately be fulfilling our purpose in the greatest way possible. You mentioned Jacob and Esau. This is page 130. It discusses this idea. that we just read in our Torah portion this past week. All right, let's go to the lesson 4.
The world of chaos.
Again, the world of chaos.
By the strong desires of animals. The fact that it shouts louder does not make it more